And we are live.
Okay. Hi, Salil, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to this live discussion with Salil about the session that he shared on last Friday about the importance of customer journey in digital marketing. And I think one of the important points that you made, Salil, at the opening of your talk itself, that product managers or marketing people may say that they do map the customer journey, but generally they mistake it for brand journey, product funnel, and acquisition of patients.
Yeah,
So I would say, for the benefit of our audience, can you briefly explain brand journey, product funnel, and patient acquisition process so that they're able to make the distinction?
sure. So thank you, Anup and CredoWeb for having me, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be interacting live with you. So thank you for the question, Anup. I think it's a very important distinction. I think many times what I have observed is that when I do my workshops with companies and they're working on live brands to identify opportunities where they can create touch points with their customers. They are essentially working with brand journeys, not customer journeys. Now, there's a difference between the two. And the basic difference is that a brand journey is essentially the process of a prospect discovering a brand. Okay, and it's about how people who are not yet your customers go through the whole process of the buying behavior, right? So it's about people becoming aware of your product, people becoming trying to evaluate options, doing a lot of information search to see whether there are alternatives available, looking at what are the ways in which they can actually make that brand choice. Okay, and how are they able to then they come to the buying decision and then they become a customer. So the brand funnel or the product funnel or the brand journeys and all are essentially not about customers. They're about people who are yet to become your customers. So they're basically prospects. And how you can get them to your brand is an important part of the marketing journey. And that's a very interesting part. But it's only half the question, right? It's only half the point. So what happens is brands think that they have kind of closed the deal once the a prospect becomes a customer. And the marketers have not spent a lot of time trying to understand how to retain those customers. So we know that there's an old adage that says that retaining customers is cheaper than acquiring new customers, and that's the place where I think pharma has still not really understood how to manage that part of the situation. How do you retain people who are on your product? Who are people who are, they can be product, they can be doctors, they can be patients, they can be purchase managers, they can be whoever, right? So a very important part is identifying who your customer is. Now that's a different discussion, but whoever your customer may be, the brand journey or the funnel or the acquisition model is about how they can discover your product and become your customer. The customer journey is the later and the more important part of it. If you want to make that person retained on your brand, if you want him to continuously give you repeat business, you want him to do repeat purchase, you want him to retain himself on the business, you want him to become loyal, you want his advocacy, and finally you want him to become an ambassador for the brand, right? That's the true sense of having acquired a person, acquired a customer, and then managed him through the whole journey of how he becomes an advocate, about retaining his loyalty. And I think that is where the blue ocean of experiences and services lie. Our problem is the moment that we close the deal, the moment a doctor prescribes, or the moment a patient buys my product, I think the deal is closed. That's it. I don't really worry about what happens after that. In isolated incidents, we may do it, but it's half-baked. It's not a good, coherent strategy that companies have come up with. I think that is the fundamental difference between a brand funnel or a patient acquisition model versus a customer journey, which continues beyond the sale. And the more important part is how you can actually, and loyalty builds up beyond the sale. A one-time sale is not loyalty. How do you make sure that the person comes back to you? How do you make sure that he gives you positive reviews? How he promotes your brand and how he promotes your service and he promotes your organization? I think that's the more important part of it, which leads to greater joys. The lifetime value of the customer improves if you have a thorough or a very granular customer journey, not simply a patient acquisition model.
Okay, so would I be right in phrasing your answer as brand journey is essentially something that is inward looking and your plans for the brand, whereas customer journey is actually finding out what's all there in his everyday, day to day routine, whether it comes to his personal life, his professional life, his interaction with patients, his handling a particular the therapy area. It's all about how he goes about navigating. And I think what you're trying to say is that that's where we are lacking in, our understanding of what really the doctor is or the patient is looking for when it comes to healthcare.
I think we are comfortable with things that we know, and what we know is our brand, our company, our portfolio, and our features and benefits, and we are very comfortable with that. So therefore, we stop with it. Moving to a customer journey requires a pivot in the way we think. It's about moving away from thinking about the brand to thinking about the customer, empathizing with the customer, putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, and understanding what sort of pain points, what kind of experiences, what's the whole journey that he likes, right? When he discovers the brand, from the point of time that he discovers your website or your landing page or whatever, from there on, how does his experience build up? Every touch point becomes important. Now, this is something that we are not, it's difficult for us to monitor because this is an external thing. It's not us. We don't know. We are not comfortable knowing the customer yet. Although we think that we know our customers well, most of the data that we have, or at least that I have seen, is mostly demographic. It's the age, the socioeconomic class, the location, the size of his practice, or what's his prescription behavior. Beyond that, we really don't have any information that correlates with his making the brand choice, or what is it that led him to prefer my brand over the other. If I understand that, then I can actually expand that to many more of the prospects who come in. I think that pivot, that the point that you made is crucial. That the thinking process, the pivot in the thinking process is about how I move away from thinking about my product, to thinking more about my customer. And I think that's where the difficulty starts. The heavy lifting is, the proof of the pudding lies over there. So that's quite difficult.
Yeah, I think that's very illustrative. Even the example that you shared as to how a doctor goes about discovering your brand versus your pushing your brand are two different things.
Yep.
The example that you gave about the cholesterol case, where the controversy erupted about the HDL versus LDL and what is the real issue, and that's where the journey begins for a doctor as to he wants to find out what's the truth behind this controversy. And if you have done your homework, that is, if you have mapped the patient's, the customer's journey and what he's looking for, and if you've already put in content in response to the controversy, that's where he makes his first connect. And then he comes to, the content that you have created, and then the content that his peers have seen about the same topic, which reinforces that your content is of some value to him, and then he lands on your website or wherever the information is there, and then he actually requests for a
Protocol.
that was something amazing for me to listen to, because all the time it is a poor rep who is the pressure is on him to get the call, and the entire force is on, and we call for field force for that reason. I think the entire force is on him to be able to get the access, whereas what you are saying is of a completely different approach, where you try to understand what are the pain points of the doctor, when does he really need information that can have some impact on his prescription, some impact on his managing his patients. Those are very different things, and given the pervasiveness of the Google and the digital world, it's very easy for him to access the information at the point when he needs it.
Yeah.
Whereas what is currently happening with the pharma is that they have a sales cycle, 30 days, once in 30 days they have to go and give a particular message, and there is really no understanding whether this is the message uh, that the doctor is looking for. So you have really turned Salesforce effectiveness on its head, because what we measure as Salesforce effectiveness is that whether the message has been delivered, at the right time to the right doctor, and so on and so forth. Whereas the rightness of it should actually be viewed from the customer's point of view, and this is possible only through what you called as the multi-channel approach and the closed loop approach to marketing.
Sure. Two things that I've done. So what I have talked about is not really something very new. So, you touched upon the three things that were supposed to be the fulcrum of Salesforce efficiency. So that was the right message to the right customer in the right frequency, right? What I have added is the right channel.
Right, Charlie.
That's the only one, right? So it's not a triangle anymore, it's a square. So there are four different rights over there. It's the right customer, the right message, right frequency through the right channel. Now, a couple of things that I've drawn inspiration from. Now, this is a hypothetical case, right? This is something that I've just conjured out of thin air and tried to show that there can be a scenario like this. But I think it is an important way in which transformation has to happen across organizations, because what is going to, the current model we know is broken. We know that people are essentially trying their level best to go and, like you said, force their way through the field into the doctor's chamber. And now this brings us to a very important point that Peter Drucker had raised, right? So, well-known management guru who we love to quote, always said that the best form of marketing should never look like marketing.
Yeah.
Right. So when he says that it shouldn't look like marketing. If you are actually creating a pathway, a journey where it doesn't look like you're selling anything to the customer.
Yeah.
The customer in that example is not even looking for your brand. He's looking for something which is completely different. It may be related indirectly, but it's not your brand. And today our problem is that anything that is not related to my brand, I am not interested in. So if I am able to expand that point of view and say that, how do I make people more, how do I create more stimuli or more triggers which might lead this person or the prospect to my product, I think that's the true use of a customer journey. And over here, this is not really, post-purchase. This is up to the point of purchase. So you can call it a brand journey, you can call it a patient acquisition or a customer acquisition model also. But I think the important part is it's not interruptive, and it is essentially not looking for a customer for your product. I think Seth Godin said this very well. Seth Godin said that you don't look for customers for your products. You actually create products and services for your customer. And I think from that perspective, the right information that your customer is or your prospect is looking for is a good trigger for you to begin the acquisition process. And if you're able to kind of lead him through multiple content formats, multiple levels of multiple devices, multiple channels, and you're able to engage, the customer engagement piece happens from 1 minute to 4 minutes to 9 minutes to 15 minutes. So the model over there is not about selling, and in my opinion, this plays very well to the three rules of the digital economy. First rule is that your business model is not to sell products. It is basically to engage customers. Okay, selling products, I'm not saying is not important. It is, but it should not be the focus. The focus has to be on engaging the customer and giving him a great experience. So that's the second rule, right? Your competitive advantage happens where? Competitive advantage happens at the level of the experience. And that's why Gartner actually said that 90% of organizations are competing at a customer experience level, not at product, not at portfolio, not at size of the field force. So if that becomes now how do you manage to engage and how do you have create a great experience? Only when you have data, when you are focusing on data. And that's why data is the new oil, basically comes from there, right? Because that's the gold, that's the pot of gold, which tells you about what your customers' interests are or what your prospects' interests are. And therefore, you can create a content strategy. Maybe you think of the right channels and you target all those things to him. And then he kind of, flows through that beautifully. And the last thing I want to say here is the biggest pivot over here is about moving the interaction with the customer from a one-time static interaction that happens when a rep meets this guy, and like you said, 30-day cycle, we come back after 30 days only. There's nothing that happens in between. How can I convert that and how can I leverage technology to think about moving this from a one-time static interaction to a live and a dynamic event that the customer is constantly engaged through different pieces of content, through different channels, through different formats. He's constantly engaging with my product, with my website, with my company, with my organization, or whatever service that I'm creating, and therefore the experience actually moves up. Now, if most people mistake experience to be a one-time event, It's not. It's rarely a one-time event. It's an accumulation of all the touch points that have happened, all the interaction that the person has had with a brand, and that leads up to the final experience, right? So it's important that at every touch point you need to be able to almost date the customer. You need to be able to give him that sort of an experience that he's special, or he or she is special, or he or she makes a lot of difference. It doesn't matter whether that guy hasn't given you even 1 rupee in return. That's not the idea. The idea is that this will come later. What you're doing is essentially trying to acquire. And when you acquire, you will basically then have a whole pool of captive people to be able to sell your products. You can cross sell, you can upsell, you can do whatever. So the first thing is to get loyalty, to engage, give them an experience, and make them enjoy that whole journey. I think that's what I was trying to show from that example.
Yeah, and I think it was put across very well. I hope it's very clear to our participants now how customer journey is different from a brand journey or creating a sales funnel or patient acquisition. So I will take 1 minute from now to just request our participants to partake in the poll that is posted on the same page where you are viewing this video, as well as where you would have viewed the webinar by Salil. So the question that is there in the poll is, does your brand plan consist of a granular customer journey? And the four answers are no, I don't know what it means. That means I don't know what a granular customer journey is. No, but we have patient acquisition models. And the third answer is we have started to work on customer journeys. And the fourth one is mapping customer journey is in our DNA. So please answer these questions, because that will give Salil and the other speakers a little bit more insight as to where you are and where you need to go, so that in the forthcoming webinars they can touch upon those points. So just a quick pause for you to answer those questions in 30 seconds. So, Salil, you also spoke as the new normal as an ideal time for businesses to pivot and reinvent their business models. Can you give some examples of how businesses have pivoted in the past when faced with such inflection points? It could be in pharma, it could be very good, or devices or healthcare, but it could be in other sectors as well. And the challenge is, what are the lessons that pharma can adopt to bring about such a shift in the current situation that we are in?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and this is a question that I always get whenever I do my workshops or when I'm talking to people about the need for pivoting and all that, right? So, uh, my favorite example is Apple, and Apple is the way that Apple pivoted from its devices to its services strategy is brilliant. I mean, to imagine that an organization of that scale, a 250, $260 billion dollar organization, which is valued, its valuation of one company is larger than the entire pharmaceutical industry, the global pharmaceutical industry, right? It's such a big one. So generally, people tell me that we have a lot of scale, we are a huge organization, we've got too much of money invested in this business for us to pivot. It's easy for you to say because you don't have skin in the game. And then when I tell them about the way that I conjure up a conversation between whoever that large-hearted manager was who went and told Tim Cook or the CEO of Apple that, boss, we need to move, because devices are not going to take us into the future. If you have to create a sustainable and sustainably differentiated model, then I think customers are asking for products. And if you think that Apple has not invested too much of money into product research, then it's a nice factoid that the research budget of Apple is equal to the research budget of Spain. One large European country. That's the sort of money. So billions and billions of dollars have been poured into product research by Apple, and they just made that shift. It wasn't an immediate one, but it was a definitely consciously thought of shift where they moved away from devices to it's supposed to be the largest strategic shift since the iPhone, when Apple moved away from being a computer company to a consumer electronics company. Today, Apple is moving away from being a consumer electronics company to a entirely different company which offers entertainment, media, music, fitness, you name it, it's there. So business models are blurring. You don't really know what Apple is into. Is Apple a hardware company? Doesn't seem like that anymore, considering the new products that they're about to bring in. And consumers rewarded them handsomely. I mean, it's like 24%, 23% of their revenue, $50 billion out of the 218 billion comes from services alone. So that alone shows you that their pivot was extremely successful, and they are going to build a massive business model out of that. So that's one of my favorite. Another example outside of pharma, before I come to pharma, is YouTube. Okay, so YouTube, I don't know how many of you know this, but YouTube started off as a dating site. It wasn't meant to be a video launcher. It was supposed to use videos, but it was supposed to be a dating site where, like Tinder, where you put up your pictures, you put up a video or something like that. This came years, decades before Tinder. So when the people realized that it wasn't working, that no one was going to put up a video and make yourself available for dating, it's a very embarrassing thing to do. So then they realized that their model was right, but the probably application of that model was probably wrong. So they continued to have that video thing, the video streaming piece of it, and they allowed consumers to do whatever. They opened it up. Right? And then you saw people posting videos of everything and their uncle. So whatever they wanted, there would be ridiculous videos, there would be really informative videos. Then a whole host, it opened up an entire ocean of information that started to come up. And that's when Google, they caught the attention of Google, and Google picked up that organization, and then they were inundated in legal cases because copyright violations were rampant and all of that. And Google took care of all of that, and they kind of put governance processes in place. So that's another excellent example of how an organization can pivot. I think from a pharma, coming to the industry that we are very passionate about, right? Pharma. I think some of the examples are from some of the organizations that have worked in the past, like Novartis or GSK, right? So Novartis essentially realized that the traditional blockbuster model, the Galvus and the other kind of, the Diovan and the Exforge kind of a model, was a red ocean. And this was not somewhere they didn't find that they were going to succeed. And the internal rate of return on innovation in those areas was rapidly decreasing because the next product that came out was an incremental innovation. It really wasn't something which was radical enough for you to build a blockbuster out of. Right, so the traditional blockbuster model wasn't working for Novartis. So Novartis completely reorganized its whole organization, the R&D and all. They laid off about 3,000 people a couple of years ago. You may remember this. And they took up tech platforms, right? They built the Biome platform, which recently, when Vas Narasimhan, the CEO of Novartis, had come to Hyderabad, he announced that Biome was going to be based in Hyderabad. Right? It's an innovation laboratory for them. It's an area where they quickly test for precision targeted medicine. Right, so they moved their model completely away from traditional blockbuster models to precision, very, very clear cut model. GSK is doing something like that. Okay, then GSK has also gotten into this value capture model, which is essentially moving away from respiratory, which was its core TA, where it doesn't seem to be getting too much of leeway to enter into immuno-oncology. Immuno-oncology is a high margin area where you would have differentiated products. You're thinking about how you can use gene therapy and you can use pathway drugs and all targeted medicine. All of that, which essentially will be a value capture strategy for GSK. So it's a pivot of large organizations. These are $40 billion companies, right? BMS. BMS has also pivoted away from a mass market drug maker to a specialist niche play. So there are many examples like this. You can think of Roche, right? Roche and its acquisition of Flatiron. And Roche has completely moved away from, the example of Roche is in the area of rheumatoid arthritis, where they did, and to continue from the customer journey part, right? So they essentially worked with the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society in Britain, in the United Kingdom, and they mapped detailed customer journeys of patients, of doctors, of all the stakeholders who are treating rheumatoid arthritis and identified hundreds and thousands of touch points. This gave them an entirely new picture of the kind of products and services that they could create. So the new interventions in the rheumatoid arthritis space are not medicines. The new interventions are digital therapeutics. And they're releasing apps, they're releasing diagnostic tools, they're releasing patient information outlets. So they're doing a lot of different things. And this, I think, is a great example of how pharma must actually move away from a product-oriented thinking. I'm not saying that Roche will not bring out new medicines. Of course they will. but the way they are treating their customers, the way they are taking pains to make sure that the patients who are on their medicines are are getting the right information. They know how to manage their disease. They know what biomarkers to evaluate. They know how to interact with the HCPs. Meanwhile, HCPs are getting more and more information on upcoming therapies, making sure that they're targeting the medicines to the right people instead of just using whatever is there. So these are all very, very important interventions that an organization of the size of Roche, which is probably the largest company in the world today, or
Yes.
will be very soon, the
Yeah.
largest company in the largest pharma company in the world, will probably, these are, I think, examples where pharma has made a huge level of pivoting. My point over here is that, look, it's easy for global pharma to pivot because they have a huge dependence on innovation in their product category, right? Indian pharma doesn't have that. Indian pharma is basically a Me Too industry. So your product is never going to be the differentiator. So I don't expect Sun Pharma or Lupin or anybody to kind of reorganize their R&D and start thinking about anything else. Your cutting edge in the market is your relationship with your customers. Right. So migrate that thinking about how you are able to kind of reorganize your R&D and all that. Migrate that to the customer interface. How can the customer interact with you better? Given the size of your portfolio, given the size of your field force, given the size of the SKUs that you have, you should be able to create wonderful experience models for all these guys. They don't have to look around for information. They don't have to kind of keep constantly Google information. If I can extend this by one more minute, a very important point that came up during one of my discussions with a senior executive in an Indian company was that he told me that every one of his products have websites. Okay, every one of his products, and they said, and he thought that it was a sign of digital maturity, which is okay. I mean, every product has a website. That's great. You're digitally making your information available. But when I spoke to doctors to ask about these, their experience with these websites, those were obviously aimed at doctors. So I spoke to a couple of doctors, a few doctors. Doctors told me, yeah, they may have, but the problem is I am a generalist. I will not go to one product website and seek only information on one brand. I want all the information together. Now, what these guys would have, if they had a customer empathy, if they were thinking about it from a customer's point of view, they would have realized that whenever a customer logs into that one website, he has a 10-field registration form to fill up. Okay, he fills up that. It's quite intense for a busy doctor to do all of that. He fills up that form, goes into the website, finds information only about one brand. And if he wants to find the other brand, there's no way he can navigate internally. So he has to log out of that website, Google the next brand, go to that website, again the 10 field form comes up. Right, because it doesn't read him as the same doctor. Yeah, so interoperability within systems. All you require is one single sign-on for him to get access across all the product websites that you have. That's all you had to create. But this is how, after doing all the hard work of coming up with product websites and doing all the information, you screw up on the experience. The customer gets a terrible experience, and what you add up increasing is the bounce rate. You don't have customer engagement, but you have angry customers because the experience is terrible. So simple things like this, if you would have thought about it from a customer's point of view, you would have thought about it from, another example is another large Indian company. The moment you go to their website, what you see is all investor charts, information about investors. Now, who's coming to your website? Is your website meant only for Dalal Street, only for Wall Street? If it's only investors who are coming, then why are you making a website? I mean, you can interact with them on different platforms, right? The point is, if patients come or doctors come, there's no way they are going to be able to navigate through that website. They see completely different information on the landing page, right? So those are some of the things that I can think of where experience gets completely lost, unfortunately.
Great. So, one thing for a company to make a website for each product, whereas the customer, when he's a generalist, he would like to have everything in one place. But on the other hand, if he's a specialist and if you show him everything from from cardiology to orthopedics, and if he is interested only in cardiologists, probably that again would be something that's where I think the customer journey is so important.
And that's how you design the website, right? For whom is it meant? And if
Right.
it's going to be multiple specialities coming, then you have to have multiple sections. The whole designing of the website then becomes important.
Right. So, Salil, a specific question now. So, for our participants to understand, what according to you are the key components of moving from selling products to creating customer experience in terms of the background work that they need to do? Like we just discovered, putting one product or multiple products on the website. What are the resources they need? And what kind of collaborations, because this involves a lot of technology which has to be given by somebody else, and the possible time frame for such a shift.
See, the most important thing that organizations need to do is to change their thinking, and that is, everybody is so close to the ground and so caught up in operations. Everybody is always paranoid about delivering on numbers. I have to meet my budgets for this month. So the challenge for any senior executive, a CEO, C-suite, anybody from the C-suite is essentially twofold. One is how do you manage business continuity while preparing for the future? Right, so there the change has to happen at a very different level. You cannot kind of ramp up the change within your existing model and all that. You have to kind of do a lot of experimentation on the side. So the agility and the flexibility within a system has to happen. The thinking about the customer, empathizing about the customer is the first thing. Getting all the data that is required about the customer in is going to be very, very important, right? Now, this is another area where pharma has not really done well. I mean, in the sense that we are not really a data-based and evidence-based marketing industry. We use evidence to talk about the features and the benefits of our products, but we don't really use evidence from a perspective of bringing in customer data or customer preferences into tailoring our messages. So you have a one-size-fits-all strategy, and one of the reasons why reps get driven out of clinics is because it really makes no sense to them, for the customer. There's no resonance with the message. So those are important things. So understanding your customer, knowing everything that is there is possible to know about your customer, and getting that data-based orientation where you start to think about it from a data, understand the importance of data. The third thing is how much emphasis do I lay on experience? Okay, and it's not really the job of a sales and marketing organization alone to think about customer experience. It's everybody. The entire organization has to think about it. So does a supply chain person understand that every delay in a packet reaching the pharmacy can actually create a bad experience? Does everybody in the factory realize that what they're doing is essentially saving lives? Now there are senior executives who have laid a lot of stress on this, and they've tried to bring that culture in. But those are more exceptions than the rule. The real in the real world, when the rubber hits the road and everyone is pushed into delivery, at that point of time everybody is, you know we go back to our own KPIs and our own KRAs and our own thing, saying that this is what my job is. Nothing beyond this is really my job. So that sort of a siloed approach, siloed thinking really needs to go away. Apart from that, I think understanding technology. And now then technology part comes very, very later. So once you have these basic things in, which is customer data, ability to work together, bringing data-based evidence management and all those kind of things, and then empathizing about the customer. These are the more important parts, and technology comes very later. I think technology there are enough off-the-rack products that you can use, but it's important to get the objective right. If you understand what you're planning to do, and if you understand what you want to do, I think from there it really makes sense. So digital transformation, or at least when you're starting to think about pivoting from the business model, I think it is important not to let go of what we are doing at this point of time, but to build on that. How do you make it better? Because our current business model is not without its flaws. If we examine it closely enough, we'll find enough flaws within it. There, many times technology can offer immediate solutions. You can think about how to repair it, or how you can do that in a more efficient manner and all. I think that's a better way of doing it. You continue with your existing model, think about how you can make it better while infusing in external data and outside in perspective about how the customer views the business. And therefore, slowly but surely the organization starts to pivot. In terms of time frame, I think it can be anything between 6 months to 6 years, or
60.
maybe 60 years also. It depends on it depends on how much you want to pursue it, because sometimes these projects get kicked off by a well-meaning leader, and when the leadership change happens, everything just goes out of the window. And it can be really frustrating for people who have put in a lot of effort in that area. And this doesn't happen in small companies or in sub 500 crore companies. Even large multinationals, I've seen this happen many times. I myself have been, involved in two service models. They were not my ideas, but they were ideas that I had inherited in previous organizations. And as leadership changed, both those, everything just went out of the window. The whole priority changed, everything changed, and we just stopped getting into it. One of the reasons that people are a little bit wary about getting into service models is because you can anger the customer more than engage.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful. You have to get everything right. It's not necessarily right the first time, but you have to get it right quickly. You can't keep repeating mistakes because customers have no obligation to engage with you. They have enough choices in the industry, and that's what is a large threat that is coming up, because the entire service sector is mushrooming with smaller companies, digital health tech companies, which understand this whole concept very well. They are problem solvers, not product pushers. Right. So when you're problem solving, if you're coming in to create to kind of understand how patients are not getting information, no idea about how there's no ecosystem where all services of healthcare can be offered by one platform, etc. Those are things that pharma has very conspicuously avoided getting into. Citing business model. This is not our business model. We only make medicines. So the threat that is coming into pharma because of its lack of ability to pivot or understand the changes in the microenvironment is that you run the threat of becoming relegated to a supplier of cheap medicines. That's it.
Yeah, so it's something like the popular phrase that repairing the plane while it is still in flight.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And for pharma it might be like changing the course of an oil tanker, which cannot pivot given its size. And but I was listening to a very interesting webinar uh, uh, on a forum where the study was presented by this tech company which is based out of Bangalore called Bioformis. And what they have developed is a application that Novartis has tied up with them, and they have actually done a RCT for that app, wherein they have, on one arm you have patients only on Entresto, and the other arm you have patients with Entresto and this compliance app, and that app helps the patient to access healthcare or medical help as early as possible. Because one of the problems is that, in heart failure patients, is that by the time they come to the hospital, it's quite late, and therefore the intervention cost is very high. And this clearly showed that the compliance was high, complications were much lower, and as a result, it has got FDA approval. So, you talked about digital therapeutics in the
Yeah.
first part of your talk, and it's very surprising now that the digital therapeutics, which have got nothing to do with a physical pill, are also having to get FDA approval. That shows the importance the digital therapeutics have on healthcare as a whole. So I think this is the first pivot that pharma could make, is to find out who's already there in the field, which can enhance the compliance part of it, reduce the complication. And in a country like US, where the insurer is the one, and increasingly in India also in the higher segments of income, it is the insurer who is partly approving the treatment process. I think it's important to demonstrate such benefits that combines pill with a technical application, which could be an app or a sensor and an app combined. In this case, it was a sensor which interpreted the data in a way that the patient could understand, and which the doctor simultaneously saw. So it was a very interesting. So I just remembered that when you.
And that's a great example, Anup. I think that's what I was referring to. That you don't need to essentially think about stopping everything that you're doing and reinventing the wheel. Essentially, if you examine your business model closely, you will find areas like this where external technology platforms, they can be external or you can build them yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever is required, you can plug the gaps. And technology essentially is a resource liberator. So I mean, very few people really understand what resource liberation means, right? So if you had to taking your example of compliance and ensuring a better adherence to Entresto, if this had to go through manual counselors, if you had to employ counselors, imagine the kind of costs that the company would have had to bear. If you had to hire such people, put them into the offices of every cardiologist and all that. Here you essentially have a one platform with your, an app or whatever the technology is, to simply deliver even more superior benefits in terms of data, in terms of adherence, in terms of patient simplicity of communicating a message to the patient, and overall returns in terms of increased brand sales. So it's not that you need to do anything different. It's just about trying to understand where I can deploy technology, and that all comes from the strategy. So if you have your strategy right, there'll be more and more opportunities where you can actually do digital transformation.
Yeah, so what you're telling me is that you need to have a clear idea of your objectives. What happens, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the earlier days, a visual aid maker used to come and say, I have this 3D technology now for your. So even the technology vendors are coming with platforms which they say, per week you can do so many webinars, so many Zoom calls, and you adapt that without really understanding is your objective being served through this.
Yeah.
I think once you get your objective right and you're convinced in your mind that digital is an enabler and as you said, a resource liberator, I think it will be easier for them to at least make small pivots, if not a big pivot, a small pivot that adds some value, which both the doctor and the patient, like in this case of this Entresto and Bioformis, can tangibly see, as well as the other stakeholders like the hospitals and the insurance. So I'll come back again to the point that we discussed earlier, the customer's journey in when he comes to know that this cholesterol controversy has erupted. I'm sure that what made the doctor to go and search for it is that given that you have Google empowered patients today, some of them might come back to you and say, doctor, you prescribed me a statin and this is what I am reading about statin. I am getting pain in my muscle.
Yeah.
So a proactive doctor would immediately, as soon as a controversy, so if the controversy is actually opportunity to give the right information. So, it depends on the proactiveness. So you very nicely put across there, and you kind of superimpose that doctor's journey with the same journey that a Google consumer goes through from the time he wakes up. So different points of engagement as soon as he gets up, when he travels to his work, when he interacts with his professionals, when he attends a seminar, and then finally, for me, the delightful point, being the person who loves medical reps more than anybody else in the pharma and the frontline managers. I was so delighted to hear that the doctor asks for the rep to come and meet him, and the rep doesn't have to wait, but the doctor kind of speed tracks him because he's the one he wants to meet with, and he has a very meaningful interaction with him. And I think that is an excellent example of creating customer experiences through your field force itself.
Yeah.
So a digital empowered field force, creating delightful experiences rather than the 30 people waiting outside and doctor having to do, who's the lucky one and point his finger and call the lucky one. And I see this happening, So given that it has got such a huge potential to impact everything in pharma, what do you think are some of the factors that are holding back pharma to really look at digital as, as you said, something that frees your resource, something that makes beautiful experiences for your customer, for your field force? What are some things, based on your vast experience, what are some of the things that hold back pharma from, in some way, in adopting digital?
Now, this is going to be quite a provocative answer, okay? Because you have succeeded in provoking a response from me on a very touchy topic. So I think there are a couple of things. One, we've always talked about the fact that we are not a customer-oriented industry. We are very, very product-oriented, very product-centric, and it's been that way for time immemorial. And if that is the way it is, changing the DNA of an industry like that is going to be tough. So that is basically the hygiene factor. The second thing is we consider that our products are extremely differentiated. Every brand manager somehow convinces himself that the brand that he manages is the best in the industry. Okay. Now this is, this can happen at a level of myopia largely because you are too close to operations and you are not really actually able to understand the signals that are coming to you from the field force, from the customer, from different areas within the organization or outside the organization, which are telling you that, my friend, you have to do something different. Okay, your communication is not differentiated enough. I'm not able to get, my marketing campaigns are not getting off the ground. I am not able to, and that's why every brand manager is sitting and kind of, racking his head about how do I get differentiation. It's not possible. Your product is not the differentiator. Why would you rack your brains and think about differentiating in an area which is an entirely red ocean, right? It's a waste of your time. Now, the third part. Now that brings me to why are we not thinking about moving to services and experiences, right? Services and experiences are essentially a very decentralized operation. You cannot command and control a service industry, or you cannot have you cannot retain the power of the message. You cannot retain the power of the actions of a marketing campaign or something like that. You have to decentralize. It's about giving up power. It's about allowing co-creation, allowing customers to co-create. It's allowing people who are in touch with your customers to co-create rapidly. It's about responding in real time. It's about giving power to the customer or to other people who are close to the customer. It's a scary thought for a pharma marketer. Giving up control means that there'll be chaos. We really cannot control. How will we control if there are wrong messages that come in, negative messages? So, like, one of some pharma marketing teams where we were discussing social media campaigns. They said we want to run a social media campaign, but please disable comments. So why would you do social media if you want to disable comments? Because the whole idea of social media is conversation, right? And if you've not understood that, then don't do social media. It's not a broadcasting platform. For that, you have advertisement. You don't need to do social media, right? So it's not about that I don't understand it. It's a conversation. It's about the fear that I can't manage it, that I can't control it. Yeah, so that has to be a necessary step. You have to understand that you are giving up power. You are giving up power, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, let consumers play with you, like the YouTube example that I gave, right? YouTube essentially opened up its platform for people to load their videos, right? And that changed the whole dimension of the way they were thinking. They were trying to control the medium by saying that you will only post dating videos, right? Nobody responded. Nobody really put up any dating videos. The moment they gave away control and they said, no, we are not going to control the medium. It's open for you. You do what you want. Today, you know where YouTube is, right? It's such a large dissemination of information. I mean, you can get anything you want. Lovely videos are loaded on it. It's a powerhouse of content.
Yeah.
So getting that, understanding that I need to decentralize, I need to leave that, I need to trust my rep. Okay, currently probably my capability of my field force is not in such a way that I can manage this whole 200 customers coming to me with 200 personalized requests and all that. I'm not able to do that. How do I use technology? How can I bring technology in and not depend? Today, my entire dependence is on that poor fellow down over there. The least trained, the least capable, the least, the lowest in the order. Unfortunately, that's how the whole structure of the organization is. And the entire business model is resting on the frail shoulders of this poor boy, this poor guy over there, or a lady, or a gentleman, whoever. Now, doing a service model through this kind of a chain is not going to be possible. So therefore, a lot of different things have to happen. You have to have multiple points of contact with the customer. There have to be multiple levels of entry of the customer's voice into the organization, so that you can rapidly learn, build, and measure. Build as you fly, like you were saying. Like it's refueling a plane in midair. You have to continue the journey, so you have to constantly do whatever it takes. These are tough things for pharma to think about, given their current dispensation. So that's why I come back to that whole point of it's all in the mind. The change will only be driven if you start thinking differently and not there are no sacred cows, right? When you're looking at change management or you're doing some transformation, you have to question everything. And you have to question. One of the things that gets questioned in an organization like that is hierarchy. Do you need so many layers? Do you really need the structure of the team to be like that? Or would a flatter organization allow the voice of the customer to come in quickly? Then there are jobs at stake. There's a whole reorganization and a restructuring that is required. And I don't think anybody wants to bite the bullet over there. So these are some of the things that I think of which will hinder digital transformation.
So I'm glad, yeah, I provoked you. That was, the quintessential Salil coming out. In fact, you have written about this, remind you almost 5 years back in Medicine Man, because you said the essential thing in digital adoption and transformation is not about technology, it's about a mindset change where you are willing to give away power to the, we consider him as the lowest, but I consider him as the highest point, because he is the person, whatever experience you are creating is actually the result of the interaction between this rep and the doctor. So he needs to be empowered.
He's
So,
lowest in the bureaucracy, he's not lowest in importance
yes, yes, lowest in,
in the
so
hierarchy. Yeah.
yeah, so I shared in one of the digital, adapting the digital mindset, how the whole profession of medical representative came into being, was when, incidentally it was Roche again that sent its product to Japan,
Hmm.
and the products were not moving, and so they sent across this surgeon by name Dr. Ebeling, and he did a lot of search, and he found this pharmacist who was probably a PhD, if I'm not mistaken, Shihoi Ninomiya, and he trained him in all the things that a doctor needs to know about the drug, and as the rest, as they say, is history. And you've had that, and that's the model that started this, is that they found the need for a competent person to interact with that of a doctor who's very well educated. I'm sure you will recall also Hanno Wolfram recounting his glory days. When the rep was welcome to the doctor's chain. In fact, an appointment was made that saying so and so is coming from Boehringer Ingelheim, and they are the inventors of so and so molecule, and no information is available. So make sure that I have uninterrupted 1 hour, half an hour, or 15 minutes, or whatever interaction with him. So that's a very, very good point that you have brought. And I think I want to tie it up with what Deep Bhandari shared, the role of sales managers in the change scenario, where he says that we may not need the same kind of skill set rep in going forwards, which is required for transactional selling, but to be a trusted advisor. He talked about the term special forces.
Hmm.
I think that was very nice, that from being just field force going forwards, somebody who has this competence to understand the change scenario, and could be trained. And I'm sure that this training is not a one time event, but evolving, in an evolving process, that he becomes that person who can effectively interact with the doctor, and is empowered by the company to do that. So we have about few minutes to go, Salil, about 10 minutes. So I'll ask you the final question. So, what are the some of the steps that pharma sales and marketing people need to take in terms of skill building to gain confidence to adopt digital? Because as you rightly said, whether it's the marketing or the sales people, they will need a certain different set of skills, so that they will, I think, because one of the reasons I think that's withholding pharma from pivoting is that there's a lack of capability within the organizations to make this digital transformation or shift. So what is the pivot that sales and marketing managers, and both product managers and sales managers need to make, so that they can begin their digital adoption journey?
See, I think the most important point about digital is that the fulcrum of a digital initiative lies in data. Okay, data is the pot of gold. It is the oil. It is the oil that runs that engine, right? Our problem today is that we are not a data focused industry. We look for data points to support our hypotheses rather than the other way. Okay, and that can create massive disaster if we continue with that attitude, that I need to look for specific data points because I've already got the theory in my head. How to support that theory, I need to look for bits and pieces of data that I pull out of IMS or AVAX or CMARC or whatever else data source that I have. Most leaders do that, right? Look, this is what I was saying. This is what I was saying. That's wrong. It is essentially to approach a problem with an open mind and listen to what data tells you. Don't form a theory when you are basically looking at data, right? It is simply looking at data from a very, very open mind and understanding what it is telling you. If customers are telling you something that you really never thought about, or it doesn't fit into one of your theories, today the dispensation will probably just discard that theory and say that this is noise, this is not the signal, right? The signal must be somewhere else, and then you desperately look for even a little bit of information. There will be one doctor who will support your theory, and then that becomes that one doctor syndrome, right? So that is a big shift that require. I think you have to open up your mind to data. I think you have to understand that data doesn't lie, right? So you have to essentially trust the information that comes in, because this is not coming in from your people. This is live data that is streaming from every interaction, right? This is not human. There's no bias in this data. So that, I think, is the most important thing. Managing a multi-channel marketing program, it requires project management skills. Okay, I think that's an important thing, because it's very different from the single channel outreach that we do today. Today, our project management skills is conceptualization, visualization, agency management, printer management, packing management, dispatch management, logistics. So PMT, packing, moving, transporting. That's what PMT stands for in pharma, right? It's an old joke. Unfortunately, that's not the way things will look like, right? So if you have, let's say, 5 channels, okay, 5 channels through which content is going, pieces of content are moving to serve, let's say, 50 different types of segments, okay, and there is a certain frequency at which this is going, like about 5 times in a month or 4 times in a month, different pieces. Imagine the number of variables that happens, right? The cross channel integration to make sure that the right piece of content is going at the right time in the chronology of the whole multi-channel outreach, because even if one piece gets misplaced, the message at the customer's end becomes completely contorted, and you can't risk that. The whole system then falls apart. So every piece has to move with precision. Every piece has to go, and obviously this is humanly impossible. But what is the skill? So you'll have automation, right? You'll have a lot of automation there. Now, how do I become comfortable with automation? How do I become comfortable with managing this whole thing like a total project? Okay, I need to build a team to manage the project. I'll probably need somebody to take care of content. I'll need probably somebody to take care of the analytics. I'll need somebody to take care of the cross-channel thing. I'll need somebody to manage the regulatory out, the compliance part. So it's not possible for one person. So the current structure of the organization will not work. The current structure is meant for making one visual aid and 3 LBLs and 4 gifts for that one cycle, right? That's what a brand manager can possibly do. That's not going to happen in real time. When there is feedback coming in, when there's data streaming in, which is basically the lead for your next outreach, right? How many people are engaging with the content? Why have they not engaged with the content? What is the data telling you? All of this is a very time consuming thing which requires. So you need to be comfortable with automation. You need to be comfortable with project management. And I think the last part is uh, before the hygiene factor. I think the last part that I want to tell you is that I need to be able to think greatly, to have a great amount of empathy on user experience and consumer experience. Because today I don't think about it at all. Right? How my visual aid lands at the doctor, I don't bother, because when the rep comes back and tells me that नहीं डॉक्टर ने मेरे को visual aid बोलने को मौका ही नहीं दिया, so I will blame the rep for ineptitude or inadequacy in his capability and say that नहीं नहीं तुमको तो निकालना ही चाहिए, ये ऐसे कैसे हो गया यार. So I make 32-page visual aids out of for paracetamol or for a product that is extremely well known. Because I don't really know how it lands at the customer, and I'm never really bothered. I may go for field work and meet the customer, and at that point of time, that the rep will essentially take me to a doctor where he's friendly, and the doctor will sit through the detailing because he knows somebody from HOS. So that's not the real experience. The real experience we don't know. So getting a great deal of understanding or empathizing with customer, making sure that his experience is taken care of, that every point of that whole variable, every piece lands properly with him, that he can open it on the mobile phone, he can check it when he wants. Bandwidth issues are taken care of. You can't send a 28 MB file on when he's on mobile data. So those kind of things have to be taken care of, and that's, I think, a very important part, which is a very different skill than what we currently do. And I think last but not least, I mean, that's the hygiene factor is that you have to be a lifelong learner. If you think that I know everything and I have excelled at marketing and I know everything that is there in marketing, you are mistaken, because customers are teaching you every day. Customers are giving you new lessons every day. And if you are not a lifelong learner, you will stop listening to them. Your cup cannot be full. It has to always be, that's why they say it's all nice on PowerPoint when you say customer is king
Yeah.
and content is king and all that. You need to really understand what that means and apply it.
So thank you very much, Salil. That was very, very insightful. And I want to tell our participants that Salil's video on the customer journey is an excellent piece for you to start, making that pivot in your mindset, first of all. So it is still available for viewing. And we want you to encourage your colleagues, your friends in pharma, because we have to bring a shift in the entire thinking of the pharma professionals across companies, and that's why this platform has been created. So please encourage more of your colleagues to come and watch this webinars, and we are there every Friday at 5 o'clock and every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And with your support, we will plan to bring even more days of the week. If you are interested in learning, if you're truly interested in learning and can dedicate this half an hour, this 1 hour to learning, and I think that instead of worrying what will happen to my career, you will be empowered, and you will be enabled. And because this series of webinar is going to be there for 12 months, and we are going to have 40 people, 40 webinars by different people coming and sharing their expertise. So thank you once again for sparing your valuable time. I hope this has been a learning experience for you, and do share your learnings, your questions. Feel free to ask these questions. In case you don't feel like asking the questions on the platform, Salil has given you his email ID. Do email him directly, and we will take up the questions in an impersonal way, so that your questions are answered, but your privacy is respected at the same time. So coming Friday, we have a great session by Hariram Krishnan, the man who traveled from medical rep to managing director, and he's going to talk about the importance of culture, the shift in culture that organizations have to do if they have to adapt the things which Salil just talked about in terms of customer services, customer experiences. So tune in day after tomorrow at 5 o'clock again to listen to Mr. Hariram. So thanks once again, Salil. That was excellent time. And thank you all of you, and wish you all a good evening.
Thank you for having me, Anup and CredoWeb. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks to everybody who listened in. Thank you.